You're Human and You. Written by Mad Max the Black. Chapter 18. Tell the Truth and Shame the Devil. Part 1. Alone, I drifted silently through the inky blackness of the void. My whole body ached, and I hurt in places that I didn't even know existed until the pain enlightened me on their presence. I tried to move my arm, but I couldn't. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and couldn't speak. I only existed within the darkness, alone and in pain. I tried to call out for someone, anyone, to help me, but no sound emerged from my mouth. I was lost in the darkness, alone. I could feel my consciousness slipping, drifting away into the void. I tried to stop it, to hold on to what I was, to who I was, but it was slipping through my grip like water. The voice in my head, quiet and friendly, told me to just let go, to drift off into the emptiness. I tried to ignore it, grasping at my memories with more and more desperation, but it was useless. I was going.
Max!
A piercing light burned through the darkness around me, carving away at the shadows and dispelling the blackness. Instantly, I felt my memories, my very soul, return to me. I had a feeling that I was no longer alone in the darkness. Slowly, the light dispersed, but the presence remained. I was dimly aware of the sensation of something grabbing my jaw and forcing my mouth open. Seconds later, I felt an object being shoved down my throat, and immediately air flooded into my lungs. I could breathe again.
Max!
The light flared again, and I felt my fingers twitch. It died out for the second time, and the darkness crowded back around me. It pushed against my body on all sides, trying to smother what little of me there was left.
Human.
The pressure vanished suddenly as the darkness fled. Light flooded the world around me, and an eerie peace fell over my broken body. Even though I was in pain, I felt content to just bask in the presence of the being before me. Slowly it approached, almost as if it was afraid that I would disappear. Warmth spread throughout my body as it reached my side. When it spoke again, its voice sounded feminine and gentle.
Did it work?
There was a brief pause as whatever it was examined me, before it breathed a sigh of relief.
Oh, thank existence.
I groaned as the pain flared up. The figure bent down and appeared to nuzzle its head against my chest.
Rest, little human.
It cooed, warmth washing over me like a gentle stream.
You are safe here.
I felt myself slowly drift back into unconsciousness.
Gently, gently. We don't want to cause any more damage than's already been done.
Gradually, I felt myself slipping back into wakefulness. Instantly, I was assaulted by a massive amount of pain. It felt more real than back in the void, and I cried out in agony. My scream was muffled by something in my mouth, heading down into my throat. It felt like a plastic tube of sorts. I was dimly aware that it was supplying me with precious oxygen. At the sound of my cry, several different voices gasped. How could he still be alive? I felt a breeze blow across my body as I became aware that I was resting on something soft but firm. More voices around me spoke up, but I couldn't make out what was being said. There was a constant sound of metal clicking on metal in the background, and the sound of hoofbeats. A deep voice barked out something that sounded like an order. I attempted to open up my eyes as I felt the thing I was resting on begin to vibrate. I frowned slightly as I realized that I couldn't open up my right eye, wincing in pain as the surface beneath me lurched slightly. I groaned at the invading thing on my airway.
Careful!
A voice near my head snapped. Ignoring my right eye for the time being, I turned my attention to my left eye and forced it open. I was only able to get it about halfway open before the pain became too much. Colors blurred together as I tried to distinguish what was going on around me. As my vision cleared slightly, I could just barely make out the sight of the night sky above me. Every now and then a tree branch would flit by in the darkness, as would the occasional armor-clad Pegasus. Their armor glittered softly in the night. As I watched them fly by, I felt myself slowly drifting back into unconsciousness. My eye closed. I groaned softly, and then I knew no more. Pain erupted in my chest as I was jolted into consciousness. Crying out in pain, I tried to sit up and move my arms, but found that I couldn't. My limbs were bound. My wrists were strapped tightly to whatever I was lying on. As I writhed in pain, I felt a dozen pair of hooves try and hold me steady.
His heart is pumping again,
A muffled voice said right by my ear.
but his heart rate is still too low.
The wounds on my chest felt like they were on fire. Falling back, I cracked my eye open, my gaze darting back and forth. Ponies in medical masks surrounded me, working away at my body. Some of them had horns, which were all alight with magic. The wound in my chest was also surrounded in a magical glow, and it felt like pins and needles were being stabbed into it. "Keep your magic charge," one of the ponies said, eyeing something just out of my view. "We can't afford to have his heart stop again." The pony by my head shook her pink mane out of her face and looked down at me with an open eye. Her large blue eyes widened as she saw me looking back at her.
Buck, he's conscious.
She hissed, causing several of the others to gasp. I felt her hooves tighten slightly around my head, holding it down. "Keep him relaxed until the sedative kicks back in," a male voice ordered, stress clear in his voice. "I don't think he can do much in the state he's in, but it's better to be safe than sorry."
It's going to be okay, hon.
The nurse cooed nervously, running a hoof through my hair as she tried to keep me calm. I groaned again as the heat in my chest increased. I leaned my head back into the table, my vision swimming as darkness slowly crept back around me. Closing my eyes, I slipped away once more. "His blood pressure's too low. He lost too much blood. Where the fuck is the nurse with those blood transfusions?"
And I understand that, Princess. But we've done everything we can for him at the moment. The only thing left to do now is to let him rest and pray.
The annoying sound of squeaky wheels assaulted my ears as I felt myself being moved along a flat surface. I caught bits of conversation around me as I moved, but I was unable to understand anything said. I was too exhausted to care, however. As I fell back into my slumber, I heard a familiar voice speak up next to me.
Thank you, Nurse Redheart. But I'll be staying with him regardless.
I don't know how long I had been asleep for, but the first thing I became aware of as I slowly regained consciousness was that my entire body felt like it had been run over by a steamroller, then mauled by a bear. There was no part of me that wasn't sore. Groaning softly as I tried to shift my limbs, I was stiff all over, and any attempt to relieve that was met with pain. The second thing I became aware of was the fact that I was lying on something soft and comfortable, and I was pleasantly warm. That in and of itself was almost enough to make up for the fact that I hurt all over. Almost. For several minutes, I was just content to lie there in my soft, warm surroundings and listen to the gentle beep of the machine next to me. I wasn't completely sure where I was, but the whole thing had a kind of peaceful feel to it. A small itch on the side of my head eventually got me to move. After relieving it by rubbing my head against the pillow beneath me, I decided that it was time to figure out where I was. Cracking open an eye, I winced as I was assaulted by the bright sunlight. Blinking back tears, I waited for my eye to adjust before looking around. My right eye was covered with something, so I only had the use of my left eye. From what little I could see without the ability to move my head, I was in a bed inside of what appeared to be a hospital room. The walls and ceiling were all painted different shades of green, and the window in one of the walls kept up the theme, having green curtains hanging from it. A second empty bed sat next to mine, looking like someone had been sleeping in it. Glancing down, I saw that my left arm was completely covered in bandages and was currently hooked up to what looked to be a bag of blood. My right arm was in a similar situation, but with an IV needle jabbed into my flesh. In fact, Most of the different parts of my body that I could see were covered in some form of bandage. Straightening my neck, I saw that I was also hooked up to a heartbeat monitor. Laying my head back down with a low groan, I rolled my eye in the direction of the window. Outside, the sun was just setting, casting the world in a red hue, and causing the clouds to look like they were on fire. As the sun gradually sunk lower beneath the horizon, I just laid there and enjoyed the simple act of observing the beauty of the sunset out of the corner of my eye. I was brought back to reality by the sound of a door handle turning. Rolling my eye around, I watched the door open slowly, and Twilight walked in, carrying a tray of food in her magic. Closing the door with her back hoof, she walked slowly over to the empty bed next to mine. Her brow was furrowed, and she was staring at the floor, a small frown on her face as she chewed on her bottom lip. Reaching the bed, she finally glanced up, her frown deepening as she looked at me. Her eyes slowly roamed over my body, working their way towards my face. She froze, and the tray clattered noisily to the ground as she saw me staring back at her.
Max?
She whispered, taking a tentative step towards me. Unable to move to respond, I just blinked at her slowly.
Oh, thanks, Celestia!
Instantly, she was across the room, her hooves wrapped around my neck. I snarled in pain as my body screamed at the sudden pressure. She released me quickly and leapt back, apologizing profusely.
Sorry.
Approaching my bed again, she gingerly ran her hoof over the covers, smoothing them out as she looked at me, tears in her eyes. Casting a quick glance at the mess she made with the tray, she lit up her horn. All the food returned to the tray, and she placed it gently at the foot of the empty bed.
How are you feeling?
She asked, returning her gaze to me and giving me a small smile. I responded with a long, low groan. She giggled slightly at this, wiping the tears from her eyes.
I would expect so, given the state your body was in when we found you.
I gave her a questioning look, hoping she understood.
When the ponies who took you removed your collar, I was immediately alerted, and Sunny and I began to look for you.
Twilight said softly, still running her hooves over the sheets.
With the help of my guards, we arrived just in time to blast that massive human off of you.
Another questioning look as she cocked her head to the side.
How did we find you?
She asked, looking into my eye. Gritting my teeth, I shook my head once, barely moving.
Where's Sunny?
At that, I nodded once, still gritting my teeth in pain.
She's back in the library with Spike. I can send for her right now if you'd like.
Shaking my head once more, I dropped my head back, groaning in pain. The simple act of moving my head left me with no energy. Breathing heavily, I just stared up at the ceiling. Beside me, I could feel Twilight's hoof stroking the bedspread continuously. Finally mustering up enough energy, I glanced down back at her. She was just sitting there, running her hoof absent-mindedly over the corners as she stared off into the distance. Tears slowly slid down her cheeks, dampening her fur. As her hoof neared my hand again, I reached out and grasped it weakly with my fingers. She flinched and blinked once, then glanced down at my hand.
Sorry,
she murmured, ears splayed backwards.
It's just...
More tears streamed down her face as her breath hitched in her chest.
I thought I lost you.
Laying down, she nuzzled my hand with her cheek, closing her eyes as she cried silently.
I had to revive you twice, and even then they weren't sure if you were going to make it.
I touched my fingers, trying my best to stroke her cheek with the tips. It wasn't much, but she seemed to get the message, because after several minutes she sat back up and smiled weakly at me, wiping the tears from her face.
Thank you.
I blinked once before glancing over at the table beside me. Twilight followed my gaze. Her eyes widened, and her face lit up when she saw what I was looking at. Lifting up a cup of water in her magic, she floated it over to me. I sucked greedily on the cool, refreshing liquid, shivering slightly as it raced down my parched, cracked throat. Draining the glass quickly, I closed my eyes and sighed happily. This caused Twilight to giggle.
You should get more sleep,
She said, placing the cup back on the table.
The doctor said the best possible thing for you right now is rest.
Leaning over, she gently nuzzled my head before retreating to the opposite bed. Her horn lit up and the book slowly faltered into view.
I'll be here when you wake up again. I promise.
A smile touched my face, and then I closed my eyes and happily drifted back into oblivion. I fell to the ground as the entire castle shook from the force of the shout. The faceless statues around me tumbled as well, breaking apart as they crashed to the floor. The horse whinnied in fear. Her wings spread wide as her head went back and forth. I tried desperately to regain my footing, but the floor was shaking too much and I was flung back down. With a loud crack, the floor opened up beneath us, the stone crumbling away. My companion took to the air, her wings beating feverishly. I was not so lucky, and with a shout of terror, I plunged into the darkness beneath. I fell for several seconds before I hit the ground. Landing, my legs crumpled beneath me, and I rolled, narrowing, avoiding a chunk of rock. As the breeze fell around me, I rose to my feet. Thankfully, the shaking had stopped. Glancing around, I saw that I had dropped into a large, circular room. Light streamed down from the new hole in the ceiling, dust and other fine particles hanging in the air. The light filled the center of the room, casting the edges of it in shadow. Through the dust, I could see something sitting in the middle of the ring of light. Coughing, I made my way towards the object, digging slowly through the bits of the ceiling, pillars, and human statues. As I neared the light, I saw that the thing that was actually a large stone pedestal. A short pillar rested on it, a stone orb sitting on top. 6 smaller orbs branched out from the pillar, each with a different symbol etched into it. Moss and vines grew over the entire thing, a testament to how long it had stood there. Standing beside the weird structure, I stared up at it in awe. I had just reached out my hand to touch the dust-covered surface when a deep growl echoed around the room. I spun around quickly, eyes widening in horror. Behind me, glowing red eyes glaring at me from the shadows, was the darkness. It was huge, nearly 50 feet high. Its head brushed the remains of the ceiling as it towered above me.
I see you,
it growled, the room shaking slightly. Heart pounding in my chest, I slowly backed up. Eyes darting around the room, I looked for an escape route, but the room had no doors or windows. The only way in or out was through the hole in the ceiling, and as my companion was nowhere to be seen, I was on my own. I was trapped with the darkness. The ground shuddered as it took a step towards me. Quickly, I snapped my head around, locking eyes onto the beast. As it slowly stepped towards me and emerged from the shadows, I felt my jaw drop. It was like no creature I'd ever seen before. It looked like someone had taken several spare parts from different animals and combined them into one creature. The thing had the head of a horse with deer antler and a goat horn on top of its head. Its right foreleg was that of a lion, ending in a massive paw. The left one was that of a bird of prey, its long, sharp claws scratching at the dusty stone as it advanced. 2 massive wings extended from his back, the left one covered in blue feathers, while the right one was bare and leathery, like a bat's wing. Its long snake body was covered in brown fur and ended with a scaly dragon tail. As I took in its appearance with a shocked gaze, it glowered down at me, its red eyes burning into my soul.
There's nowhere left to run,
it hissed, baring its teeth. Its mouth was filled with long, pointed teeth and glinted in the dim light. A long, forked tongue slithered from between its teeth as it spoke. It drew nearer, but I was unable to run away. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor and my legs were like stone.
If you will not help them,
it roared, stopping just in front of me. I had to crane my head back just to look at its smoldering gaze.
Then you have no more purpose here.
With that, it raised its massive lion paw high into the air. Long black claws emerged from the paw. With a roar, its paw descended upon me. Screaming for all I was worth, I raised my arms as I tried to stop the inevitable end. Closing my eyes, I turned my head and waited for the impact.
Enough!
Boomed a second voice, echoing around the room and causing the castle to shake again. A gale-force wind ripped through the room, tearing the very stones from the walls and floor.
At long last, we have found thee!
So I'm pretty sure we can guess who this disembodied voice is. However, to ensure that I don't screw it up, I am going to keep up the male and female voice mixed together with a reverb going on, because I feel like it's more thematically correct for, at least for the nightmare sections. So we'll see where that goes from there, and we'll decide on that. Also, what an ending. I cannot wait to get to the second part of that. However, who else can't wait, because they are obviously too generous, are my wonderful Patreons. Thank you, my tier 1s, Pony Entertainment, McCarrio, Lord, HiE, Jason, Hyperlink, Jason Lemaster, Balance Kindness, Lost Nebula, Night and Game, Sword Brother Mordred, and Dreamless Portal. My tier 2s, Captain Blueshadow, Chaotic Mist, The Animated Ghost, DJMX 2000, Elemental Wolf, H1 Wolf King, Potato 20, Mr. Crazy Deacon, Solar Comet, 212 Trooper, Volkioid, G-Man, 121 Garza, Mackenzie, Micolas, Nocturne, Papa Leonard, Redeemer of Dark Souls, Clip, Sword Brother, and Mordred, Artie Bryant, Rihanna, Dragonwolf, Steel Spark, Saint Gunk, and Styx. A big thank you to my previous 9 tiers, Their Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and User 1842. A large thank you to my current ones, Miss Eclipse, and Silent Titan. I appreciate your guys' support so freaking much, and it means a lot to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.